Do you know demand and supply? You probably do, or at least you think you do. For example, you know that the equilibrium is where demand equals supply. And you know that the equilibrium in a market determines the price and quantity in that market. This is good. Maybe you even remember the factors that shift demand: income, price of related goods, taste and preferences, number of buyers, and expectations about the future. You might even remember the factors that shift supply: cost of inputs, technology, prices of related goods in production, number of producers, and once again, expectations about the future. You might have noticed that the goods' own price was not in that list, which probably reminded you that price is the only thing that does not shift demand and supply. That price is special in the sense that price changes quantity demanded and quantity supplied, never demand and never supply. If you remember all of these things, then you are able to predict what will happen to equilibrium price and quantity when there is a change in the environment. You can predict what happens when consumer income increases, or the price of a substitute good decreases, or a product goes out of style, or technology improves, or wages increases. We can go on and on. The important point is the demand and supply framework is incredibly powerful. It allows us to make predictions in response to change. For example, as I just mentioned, using demand and supply allows us to predict shifts in demand and supply and their impact on market equilibrium. Perhaps you're able to see a diagram here where the demand curve shifts out, price increases, quantity increases, and you can predict these things. The problem with diagrams is that diagrams only allow us to predict the direction of change. We can predict whether price will increase or decrease, or whether quantity will increase or decrease. Often, we need answers that are more specific. We need to be able to predict by how much will price and quantity change. To answer the question of how much, we have to introduce some mathematics. In general, this is done by first estimating, using statistics, what the demand and supply functions look like. Once you have the functional forms of demand and supply, you can explicitly solve for the equilibrium. Perhaps more importantly, we can use calculus to perform comparative statics. That is, we can take a derivative. Of course, the derivative is simply how we measure the change in one variable in response to a change in another variable. For example, how does the price change in response to an increase in consumer income? Or alternatively, how does quantity demanded change in response to a change in price? That last one might be familiar to you since it describes the price elasticity of demand. More generally, by calculating elasticities, you remember the percentage change in one variable in response to a percentage change in another variable. By calculating elasticities, we can forecast how market price and quantity will respond to changes in the environment. For example, we could calculate what the impact is from an increase in the sales tax. Anyway, the demand and supply framework is incredibly powerful and useful. It is also the one thing that most people think about when they hear the word economics. As economists, we better be proficient in using this tool. One last point. Once we're able to use the demand and supply framework to predict the future, like magic, the next obvious step is to ask, where does demand and supply come from? Well, the answer is that the demand for any good or service is the result of constrained optimization decisions made by people just like you and me, and these decisions are made all around us. Similarly, the supply of any good or service is the result of profit maximizing decisions made by firms all around us. As economists, it's not enough to understand demand and supply. We also want to understand the underlying decisions that create demand and supply. We really want to understand how the world works. I don't know if you're familiar with the film The Matrix. I don't know if you remember the scene where Morpheus offers Neo the choice between taking the red pill, which reveals an unpleasant truth, and the blue pill, which returns you to blissful ignorance. Well, signing up for intermediate microeconomics was your red pill, blue pill moment. I'm glad you picked the red pill.